"You need to sit down." That was the first thing the notary said to me over the phone. 3 days earlier, she had processed a property transfer with my signature on it, but I had never signed anything. My son-in-law had, and she recognized the forgery. I had spent 40 years building a hardware empire across Phoenix. My home, my business, everything was on paper, and now that paper was being used against me. My son-in-law didn't just betray my family's trust, he committed a felony, putting a target on the most valuable asset I owned. But the notary's call was just the beginning, because she hadn't just spotted a fake signature. She had seen this scheme before. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in my home office in Paradise Valley, reviewing quarterly reports for my 3 hardware stores. The kind of peaceful, productive morning I'd earned. My wife, Sarah, had passed away 7 years prior. The business was my anchor and my family was my world. My daughter, Alina, had married David 2 years ago. He was charming, an aspiring real estate investor who always had a new plan. He'd moved into the guest house 6 months back, temporarily, while he got his latest venture off the ground. When the notary, a woman named Linda Garrett, asked me to meet her alone, my first thought wasn't fraud. It was an administrative error, a misplaced form for one of my commercial properties. I agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown that afternoon. Linda was in her 50s with sharp, observant eyes. She didn't smile when I sat down. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table, a warranty deed. The property listed was my primary home, the Paradise Valley house. The grantor, the person supposedly selling it, was me. The grantee, the new owner, was an LLC I'd never heard of, Desert Vista Holdings. My signature was at the bottom, notarized and witnessed. "This is a forgery, Mr. Reynolds," she said quietly. "I processed this document last Friday. The young man who brought it in was your son-in-law, David. He had your driver's license, your social security card, even a utility bill. He was polished, knew all the right answers. But when he signed your name in front of me, the pen hesitated. It was a performance. And the signature, it was close, but it was off. It lacked your natural flow." I stared at the paper, the house, the one Sarah and I bought 35 years ago, the one where we raised our girls, valued at just under $2 million, transferred for a sale price of $1. "Why didn't you stop it then?" I asked, my voice hollow. "I almost did," she said, "but if I refused, he'd just find a corrupt notary or forge my stamp too. They sell them online. By processing it, I created a paper trail with his real ID. I recorded his thumbprint on my journal as required by law. Then I called you." She explained the next step. The deed had already been sent to the county recorder's office. Once recorded, it would be in the public record as fact. David, or whoever was behind Desert Vista Holdings, could then take out a massive loan against the property and disappear with the cash, or sell it to an innocent third party. If that happened, the law could side with the new, unknowing buyer. I could spend years in court fighting to get my own home back. My mind raced. David, living in my guest house, eating at my table. He'd been studying my signature for months. He rummaged through my office for the documents he needed. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a cold, premeditated financial assassination. Linda handed me a file. I made copies of everything. His driver's license photo, the journal entry, the deed. "You need a lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, and you need to move before that deed gets recorded. You have maybe 72 hours. I drove home in a trance. The desert sun felt hostile. I walked into my house and everything looked different. The family photos on the wall felt like artifacts from a stolen life. I could hear David in the guest house, laughing on the phone. I went to my safe, my heart pounding. I pulled out the original true deed to my property. I compared the signatures. Linda was right. The forgery was skilled, but it was a copy. It had no soul. My real signature, signed the day Sarah and I closed, had a slight flourish on the R that was entirely missing. That's when I saw it. On my desk, a notepad I rarely used. On the top sheet, faint indentations. I held it at an angle to the light. Dozens of practiced signatures, my signature. He'd been sitting at my desk in my chair, tracing my name over and over again. The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. This was his plan all along. Move in, gain trust, learn my habits, and steal the foundation of my life right out from under me. And he would have gotten away with it, if not for one ethical notary paying attention to the flick of a pen. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. If he knew I was onto him, he could accelerate the plan, or worse. I had to be smarter. I needed proof of his intent, and I needed to find out who was behind Desert Vista Holdings. That night, I pretended everything was normal. We had dinner. David talked about a can't-miss land deal he was working on. He asked, casually, if I'd ever considered a reverse mortgage to free up equity for my retirement. The gall of it made my blood run cold. After he left, I did something I'd never done before. I waited for the guest house lights to go out, and I walked quietly to his recycling bin. Beneath empty soda cans and pizza boxes, I found it, a crumpled draft of the forged deed from a print shop, and on the back, in David's handwriting, a phone number with a 702 area code, Las Vegas. The next morning, I called the only person I could think of, Marcus Chen, my oldest business partner and friend. I met him at his office and laid out the entire story. Marcus listened, stone-faced. When I finished, he said one word: gambling. He opened his laptop. "Let me make a call," he said. An hour later, he had a name. Desert Vista Holdings was registered in Nevada. Its registered agent was a law firm known for setting up shell companies, and it had been formed just 6 weeks ago. "This isn't just David, Horace," Marcus said, his voice grave. "This is a syndicate. They find people with deep pockets and vulnerable assets, often through family connections. They forge the deeds, get quick loans from shady private lenders, and vanish. The debt gets called on the property. The victim loses everything." He looked at me. "You need to go to the police now, but you need more than a forged deed. You need to prove he intended to defraud you. You need him to admit it." The idea was a trap, to get my son-in-law to confess to a felony. I felt sick. But then I thought of Sarah's rose garden in the backyard, the porch swing where we'd watch the sunsets, every memory in those walls. I looked at Marcus. "How do we do it?" "We set a meeting," he said. "You tell David you're finally interested in that reverse mortgage, that you want to meet his investment partner to discuss using the house as collateral. We wire you. We record everything." It was dangerous. If they suspected a setup, things could turn violent. But it was the only way to get a confession before the deed was recorded and the theft became a legal nightmare. I called David. I forced warmth into my voice. "You know, son, I've been thinking about that equity idea. Maybe you're right. Can you set up a meeting with your partner?" There was a pause on the line. Then his voice slick with triumph. "Sure thing, Dad. I knew you'd come around. How about tomorrow? My partner in town." I hung up the phone. My hand was trembling. Tomorrow, I would walk into a room with the man who tried to steal my home and the criminal financier backing him. I was wearing a wire, and I had one goal: to get them to say the words that would send them to prison. The meeting was set for 2 p.m. at a sleek, anonymous office suite in a Scottsdale business park. At 10 a.m., I was in a nondescript van 2 blocks away, sitting across from Detective Alvarez of the Phoenix PD's Financial Crimes Unit. The air conditioner hummed loudly, but it couldn't cut the tension. "This is your wire," Horace Alvarez said, his voice calm and professional. He helped me thread the thin microphone under my shirt, the recorder a small, hard block taped to the small of my back. "The battery is good for 8 hours. We'll be listening the whole time from here. Your job is not to be a hero. Your job is to get them talking about the deed, the forgery, and the loan. Ask clarifying questions. So, just to be clear, the deed is already signed, and the loan is against the full value. Got it?" I nodded, my mouth dry. My friend Marcus was there too, a silent, solid presence. "If anything feels off, you use the safe word," Marcus said. "Sarah, you say you need to call your accountant, Sarah, about the figures. We come in immediately." The plan was simple, terrifyingly so. I would express interest in using my home's equity to invest in David's supposed land deal. I'd let them walk me through their process, hoping they'd brag about the forged deed already being filed, or the fast-track loan they'd secured. All we needed was a clear admission on tape. At 1:45, I walked into the glass-walled building. My reflection looked like a ghost. I rode the elevator to the fourth floor. The suite door was open. Inside, it was a generic corporate space, beige carpets, a few fake plants, a reception desk with no one behind it. David emerged from a side room, a wide, confident smile on his face. "Dad, so glad you're here. Come meet Vince." Vince was everything I expected and worse. Mid-50s with a sharp, expensive suit and the cold, assessing eyes of a predator. He shook my hand with a grip that was just a little too firm. "Horace, David's told me so much about you. He has tremendous respect for your business acumen." We settled into a conference room. A notary seal and stamp sat on the table next to a fresh deed document. My stomach turned. They were going to try to get me to sign a real one right here today. Vince began the pitch. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He spoke of market opportunities, of leveraging dormant assets, of building a legacy. He slid a term sheet toward me. It showed a loan of $1.2 million against my property, funded in 72 hours. The interest rate was predatory. The lender was a company called Quick Capital Partners. "This is the beautiful part," Vince said, tapping the paper. "The title is already clear. We handled the transfer into the holding company last week. Smooth as silk. All we need today is your signature on this updated loan authorization and the funds release." I felt the wire like a brand against my skin. He just admitted to the transfer. I took a slow breath. So the deed, the house is already in this Desert Vista company. David jumped in, eager. "Yeah, Dad. We took care of all the paperwork. You don't have to worry about a thing. Linda, the notary, was great." I looked at him. He said her name. He implicated her. But Linda was on our side. Did he not know she'd contacted me? Or was this an incredible bluff? Vince's eyes narrowed slightly, just a fraction. He was watching me. "You seem hesitant, Horace. This is a life-changing amount of capital. David says you're a man who recognizes opportunity." "I am," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm just being thorough. This transfer, you have the recorded deed from the county." Vince leaned back, a slow, reptilian smile spreading. "In the pipeline. The recording can take a few days, but the signed, notarized deed is legally sufficient for our lender." He patted the notary stamp. "We have everything we need right here." A chill went through me. They didn't have it recorded yet. Linda's call had come in time. The deed was in limbo. That was our window. I decided to push. "It's just a friend of mine, a lawyer. He mentioned something about forgery rings. People stealing homes with fake deeds. Makes you paranoid." The room went perfectly still. Vince's smile didn't move, but his eyes went dead. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Forgery," Vince said slowly, "is a very serious word. It implies criminal intent. What we're doing here is a structured financial transaction, family helping family." He looked directly at David, a silent command. "Yeah, Dad," David said, his voice losing its smoothness. "This is all above board. I'd never let anything happen to your house." "But you already did," I thought. The anger was a white-hot coal in my chest. I wanted to shout it. Instead, I nodded. "Of course. Let me see the loan authorization again." As I pretended to review the document, Vince's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his demeanor changed. The practiced charm evaporated, replaced by a sharp, businesslike urgency. "You know what, Horace? I've got another call. David, walk your father through the signature pages. I'll be back in 5. He stood and left the room, closing the door behind him. It was just me and David. This was the moment. David let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. "He's intense, right? But he gets results." "David," I said, keeping my voice low, This is a lot. This is my home, your mother's home. Are you sure about all this? The deed, my signature." He leaned forward, dropping the son-in-law act. For the first time, I saw the raw greed in his eyes. "It's sure, Dad. It's already done. The house is in the LLC. Look, I know it feels fast, but this is how wealth is built today. You hold onto sentimental bricks and mortar, you die poor. We're making that equity work. And you'll get a cut, I promise." A cut of my own money. My heart hammered against the microphone. "So, the signature on the original deed, it's valid." He waved a hand, a dismissive gesture that confirmed everything. "It's valid enough. These title companies, they just push paper. They don't have handwriting experts. By the time anyone blinks, the money's moved and the asset is flipped. It's a volume business." A volume business. This wasn't his first time. Linda the notary had suspected that too. I needed more. I needed him to say the word. What if someone claims it's a forgery? David's face hardened. Then they'd have to prove it, and they'd have to explain why the notary and the witness both verified it. He gestured vaguely. "It's a he said, she said. And we have the paper. Paper always wins." The door opened again. Vince returned, but he wasn't alone. A large, silent man in a tight polo shirt stood behind him, arms crossed. Vince's face was a mask of cold fury. "There's been a complication," Vince said, his voice like ice. "It seems the county recorder's office has flagged our deed for verification. Unusual step. Very unusual." He was looking right at me. David looked confused, then panicked. "What does that mean?" "It means," Vince said, still staring at me, "that someone may have tipped them off." He took a slow step toward the table. "Horace, did you speak to anyone about our conversation? A lawyer, perhaps? An old friend on the police force?" Every instinct screamed to run. The safe word Sarah was on my lips, but I knew if I used it now, they'd bolt. We'd lose them. I had to stay in the game. I met his gaze. "I told you I'm a thorough man. I had my accountant look at the term sheet. Standard due diligence." Vince studied me for what felt like an eternity. The silent man by the door took a step into the room. Finally, Vince's lips stretched into a thin, humorless line. "Due diligence. I respect that, but it causes delays. And in our business, delays cost money." He picked up the notary stamp from the table, weighing it in his hand. "You see, the system works on trust, on the unshakable validity of a notarized document. When that trust is questioned," he slammed the stamp down on the table with a sudden, sharp crack that made us all jump. "Everything falls apart." David was pale. "Vince, what do we do?" "We adapt," Vince said, his eyes never leaving mine. "We proceed to phase 2. The loan is paused, but the asset is still in play. Horace, you will come with us. We're going to take a little drive to the county office. You will personally vouch for the signature. You will tell them it's legitimate and you wish to expedite the recording." My blood ran cold. They were going to kidnap me, to force me to legitimize their theft at the source. "If I refuse?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Vince smiled. "Then we have a different problem, a family dispute. David here is your son-in-law. He has a key to your house. He's been living there. He could claim you gifted him the property. That this is all a misunderstanding. It would tie up your asset in court for years. You'd lose anyway, just slower and poorer from legal fees. Or..." He let the word hang in the air. The silent man cracked his knuckles. The threat was absolute. I was out of time, out of options. The police were listening, but they were 2 blocks away. I had to get out of this room. "All right," I said, raising my hands in a gesture of surrender. "You're right. No more delays. Let's go to the county. Let's get this done." David looked relieved. Vince looked suspicious, but he nodded. "Good choice. Carl will drive you. David and I will follow separately." The large man, Carl, gestured for me to stand. As I did, I made a show of stumbling, bumping the table. The notary stamp and a cup of pens clattered to the floor. "Sorry, clumsy," I mumbled, bending down. As I knelt, shielded by the table for just a second, I ripped the wire transmitter from my back and shoved it deep into the vent of the air conditioning unit in the floor. I couldn't let them find it on me. The police would hear the silence, and they'd know something was wrong. It was my only hope. I stood up. Carl took my arm, his grip vice-like. Vince handed me my phone. Make no calls. Carl has instructions. We walked out past the empty reception desk toward the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw David's anxious face and Vince's cold, triumphant one. The last thing I heard before the elevator descended was Vince saying to David, "Clean out the guest house. We're burning that bridge." The van with Detective Alvarez was 2 blocks east. I was being led 2 blocks west to a waiting black SUV. My wire was dead in a floor vent, and I was getting into a car with a criminal enforcer, heading to a county office to be coerced into finalizing my own ruin. As Carl pushed me into the back seat, I had one clear, terrifying thought. The notary, Linda Garrett, was the only person outside that room who knew the whole truth. And if they were burning bridges, she was next on their list. Carl shoved me into the back seat of the black SUV and slammed the door. He got behind the wheel and we pulled away from the curb. He didn't speak. My mind raced. The police had heard the confrontation, but my wire had gone silent the moment I ditched it. Would they move? Or would they wait, listening to dead air, thinking I was still in the conference room? We weren't heading toward the county recorder's office. We were driving south toward the interstate. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. "Change of plans," Carl grunted, not looking at me. "We're meeting Vince somewhere quieter." Quieter? The word filled the car with menace. I looked out the window, memorizing street signs, looking for any chance. My phone was in my pocket, but Carl would see me use it. At a red light, I saw a police cruiser idling in the next lane. It was now or never. I threw myself against the door, fumbling for the handle. It was locked. Child safety. Carl reacted instantly, his arm shooting back to grab my shirt. The light turned green. The police cruiser drove away, oblivious. Carl backhanded me across the face, a sharp, stunning blow. "Sit still, old man," he snarled, "or this gets a lot worse." Taste of blood in my mouth. The SUV accelerated onto the I-10 eastbound. We were leaving the city. My heart sank. Then my phone vibrated, a text. I kept my head down, my hand creeping into my pocket. It was from Marcus. "Wire dead, location lost, tracking your phone, stall." They were coming, but how long? I had to create a diversion. I started coughing violently, doubling over. "I need water," I gasped. "I'm going to be sick." Carl glanced in the mirror, annoyed. He pulled off at the next exit, a semi-industrial area with a few scattered warehouses and a gas station. He parked at the far edge of a lot, away from the pumps. "Get out. Be quick." I stumbled out of the car, pretending to steady myself against the door. I glanced around. Deserted. Carl got out too, watching me like a hawk. I took a few steps toward the gas station mini-mart, then turned and hurled my phone as hard as I could into a dense thicket of oleander bushes bordering the lot. "What the hell was that?" Carl shouted, starting toward me. I raised my hands. "It slipped. I'm sorry, it just flew out of my hand." He cursed, strode to the bushes, and began frantically searching. It was my only shot. I didn't run toward the road. He'd catch me in seconds. Instead, I ran toward the back of the gas station, around the corner, and flattened myself against the wall. I heard Carl thrashing in the bushes, then his voice angry on his phone. He tossed his phone. "We're at the Shell on mile marker 147. Yeah, I'll find him." I peered around the corner. He was turned away, scanning the parking lot. I saw a delivery bay door on the side of a nearby warehouse was slightly ajar. I took a deep breath and sprinted, low and silent, across 20 yards of open asphalt. I slipped inside the dark warehouse just as Carl turned back toward the gas station. The interior was cavernous, smelling of dust and motor oil. Shelving units filled with auto parts created narrow canyons. I moved deeper into the gloom, my breathing loud in the silence. I found a hiding spot behind a pallet of tires and crouched. Minutes ticked by. Then I heard the warehouse door creak open. Carl's silhouette filled the doorway. He had a flashlight. He stepped inside. "I know you're in here, old man," he called, his voice echoing. "You're making this hard on yourself. Vince just wants to talk. But me, I get paid extra for complications." The beam of light swept across the shelves, getting closer. I held my breath. My hand closed around a heavy metal pipe on the floor. The light passed over my hiding spot, then swung back. He'd seen the movement. "There you are." He rounded the pallet. I didn't hesitate. I swung the pipe with all my strength, aiming low. It connected with his knee with a sickening crack. He roared in pain and dropped the flashlight, which spun away, casting crazy shadows. He fell but grabbed my ankle, yanking me down. We wrestled on the concrete floor, a frantic, silent struggle. He was stronger, but I was desperate. I clawed at his face, my thumb finding his eye. He recoiled with a shout, his grip loosening. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the still-lit flashlight, and ran deeper into the warehouse. I could hear him limping behind me, cursing. I found a metal stairwell leading to a second-floor office. I took the stairs 2 at a time, burst into a small office overlooking the warehouse floor, and locked the flimsy door behind me. The room had a window, but it was 15 feet down to concrete. No escape. Below, Carl was fumbling with his phone, calling for backup. I was trapped. Then from the window, I saw a miracle. 2 unmarked sedans and a marked police cruiser skidded into the gas station lot. Detective Alvarez and Marcus jumped out, followed by uniformed officers. They had tracked my phone to the bushes. They fanned out, searching. I pounded on the window. "Down here," I shouted. "Warehouse." Alvarez looked up, saw me, and pointed. They rushed toward the warehouse door just as Carl's backup arrived. A second SUV, screeching to a halt. Vince and David got out. They saw the police and froze. What followed was a chaotic, tense standoff. The police surrounded the warehouse. Vince and David were detained. Carl was arrested inside, clutching his knee. I was led out, shaking, into the sunlight. Alvarez put a blanket over my shoulders. "You're okay, Horace. You did good. We got it all on the wire until you ditched it. The confession about the volume business is gold." I looked over at David, handcuffed in the back of a cruiser. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Vince stared straight ahead, his face a mask of cold calculation. This wasn't over for him. At the station, I gave my statement. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged deed, the taped confession, Linda Garrett's testimony and notary journal. Vince, whose real name was Vincent Morty, had a record for fraud in 3 states. David was a small-time hustler who'd gotten in over his head. I thought it was over. I was wrong. 2 days later, Detective Alvarez called me, his voice tight. "Horace, you need to come back in. We found something on Morty's encrypted phone. This goes deeper." In a secured interview room, Alvarez showed me photos on a tablet, pictures of my other properties, my 2 hardware store lots and a small apartment building I owned. All had been researched, appraised. There were draft deeds for each one, with my signature already practiced on them. "He was going to take everything," I whispered, the scale of it dawning on me. "Not just you," Alvarez said grimly. "We've identified at least 4 other potential victims in the Phoenix area, all older property owners, all with family members or trusted associates who'd been compromised. This is an organized ring, and we think there's a dirty notary on the inside, not Linda, but someone else who's been rubber stamping these forgeries." My blood went cold. Linda. She was a threat to them. If they had a corrupt notary inside the system, they'd know she was the one who blew the whistle on my deed. "We have her in protective custody," Alvarez said, reading my face. "She's safe. For now. But Horace, I have to ask you something difficult. The other victims, they don't know they're targeted yet. We need to build cases. We need someone on the inside who can recognize the patterns, who can help us draw out the bigger players. You want to use me as bait, again. We want to use your case as the blueprint. and we need you to be the public face of it. We're going to press charges very publicly against Morty and David. We're going to make it clear the forgery was stopped because of an alert notary. It will send a message to the other victims to check their titles, and it might flush out the rest of the ring. The thought of more scrutiny, of being a target in the public eye, was exhausting. But I thought of the other homeowners, maybe someone like me, older, alone, about to lose everything. I nodded. Do it. The press conference was a whirlwind. I stood beside the district attorney, who detailed the sophisticated forgery ring. I was labeled the patriarch who fought back. My face was on the local news. The story got picked up by a few national outlets. The reaction was immediate. My phone blew up with calls from reporters, well-wishers, and unfortunately, my daughter Elena. She came to my house that evening, her face streaked with tears. She'd seen the news. She knew David was in jail. "Dad, I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear to God, I didn't know what he was planning." A part of me wanted to believe her, but the part that had seen the practice signatures on my notepad, that had heard David call it a volume business, was hardened. "Did you know he was in debt?" I asked, my voice flat. She looked down. He had some troubles with betting, online poker. He said he had a plan to clear it. I thought it was the real estate deal. She knew, maybe not the specifics, but she knew he was desperate and scheming. She let him into our lives, into my home. The betrayal was a family affair. "You need to go, Elena. I can't do this right now." She left crying. The house felt emptier than ever. A week later, the first letter arrived. Typed, no return address, postmarked from Las Vegas. It read, "You got lucky. The notary won't be. Stop talking, or the next document we forge will be your death certificate." It was a threat, but it was also a clue. They made a mistake. They'd confirmed Linda was a target, and they'd connected themselves to Vegas, where Morty's shell company was based. I took the letter to Alvarez. His jaw tightened. "It's them. They're getting nervous. Good, but we need to move Linda somewhere even we don't know." That's when I made a decision. I called Marcus. "I need a favor, a big one. I'm going away for a while, and I need you to spread a rumor." "What rumor?" "That I'm broken. That the stress of the case and my daughter's betrayal has caused a health crisis. That I've checked into a private cardiac clinic out of state. Let it filter through the business community." Marcus understood. "You're going dark to draw them out. To make them think I'm out of the picture. To make them get sloppy. And to keep Linda safe by making her seem irrelevant. If I'm gone and silent, they might think they've won." With the help of Alvarez and a trusted U.S. Marshal, a plan was formed. Linda was secretly relocated to a safe house in another state. A fake paper trail was created for my hospital stay. I moved into a spare apartment owned by Marcus's cousin, leaving my house under the watch of a private security firm with ties to the police. From the shadows, I started working. With Alvarez's team, we pored over the records of the other suspected victims. We found a common thread: a title company that had processed preliminary reports on 3 of the properties, including mine. A company called Sure Title AZ. And then we found him, the dirty notary. His name was Gary Walsh. He was a licensed notary who worked freelance for several title companies, including Sure Title. His seal was on forged documents connected to 2 other suspected cases. He was the inside man, making the forgeries look legitimate for a cut of the profits. We had the ringleader, Morty. We had the foot soldier, my son-in-law. We had the inside man, Walsh. But Alvarez believed there was one more piece: the financier. The person fronting the money for the quick loans once the deeds were forged. That person was still in the shadows, likely in Las Vegas. We set a trap for Walsh. Using a forged document of our own, a fake property record for a non-existent parcel, an undercover officer posed as a new scammer needing notarization. Walsh took the bait, notarizing the fake signature without proper ID. He was arrested. Under interrogation, he cracked quickly. He gave up Morty's processes, confirmed the Vegas connection, and then he gave us a name. The financier was a man named Arthur Carson, a wealthy, supposedly legitimate real estate investor based in Henderson, Nevada. Carson provided the capital for the loans, laundering the stolen equity through his network. We had it all. The entire pipeline, from the family insider like David, to the forger, to the dirty notary, to the violent enforcer like Carl, to the ringleader Morty, and finally to the money man Carson. The DA began preparing a massive racketeering indictment. My role was done. I could go home, rebuild my life with my property secure. Then the unthinkable happened. The day before the indictments were to be unsealed, Detective Alvarez was pulled from the case. Internal Affairs opened an investigation. Allegations of procedural misconduct in my case, specifically wiring a civilian without what was being called proper oversight. It was a blatant, bogus tactic to discredit the investigation and stall it. Alvarez called me, furious and defeated. "They got to someone, Horace. Carson has reach. The indictments are on ice. Without me on the case, it'll get buried in paperwork. You need to be careful if they can come after a detective." The message was clear. The system I'd trusted to protect me was porous. The man with the money, Arthur Carson, was untouchable from within Arizona. I sat in the dim light of the safe apartment, the walls closing in. I had beaten them in my house. I had helped expose their network. But the head of the snake was still out there, poisoning everything it touched. And now, because of me, a good detective's career was in jeopardy. I looked at the files spread across the table, the deeds, the photos, the name Arthur Carson circled in red. The law had failed. The police were hobbled. I was just one man, tired and hunted. But I still had one thing they didn't know I had. The notary, Linda Garrett, in her new identity, had sent me a message through a secure channel before she vanished. A single sentence. The journal, thumbprint, it's the key. The notary journal, where she'd recorded David's thumbprint when he'd signed as me. That print wasn't just evidence against David. It was a physical, biometric link to every document Walsh had notarized using the same fake identity procedures. It could connect Carson's money to the forgeries directly, in a way that was immune to political pressure. I had a choice: walk away safe with my own battle won, or take the one piece of evidence that could sink them all and deliver it to the one place Arthur Carson's influence couldn't reach. I picked up the phone. I called a number I'd never dialed before, the office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The call to the FBI was the point of no return. I spoke to Special Agent Vasquez of the Phoenix field office. I didn't tell her everything over the phone. I said I had evidence of a multi-state racketeering operation involving real estate fraud, a compromised local investigation, and a thumbprint that could connect it all. She told me to come in immediately and to bring everything. I met her in a secure federal building, not the local precinct. Vasquez was in her 40s, all sharp angles and focused intensity. I laid it out: the forged deed, Linda Garrett's journal with David's thumbprint, the dirty notary Gary Walsh's confession, the name Arthur Carson, and the suspicious sidelining of Detective Alvarez. She listened without interruption. When I finished, she leaned back. "This falls under our jurisdiction. Wire fraud, bank fraud, interstate racketeering. The thumbprint is the golden thread. We can use it to subpoena Carson's financials in Nevada. If money from his accounts went to Walsh or Morty, we have him." There was one condition. I had to officially hand over the evidence and step back. The FBI would take the lead. My public role was over. It was what I wanted, to let the professionals with untouchable reach finish the job. The federal machine moved with a different kind of power. Within 48 hours, a judge unsealed warrants for Carson's financial records in Nevada. The thumbprint from Linda's journal was matched to the one on my forged deed, and then, using Walsh's records, to 7 other fraudulent documents across Arizona and California. The link was made. Carson's shell companies had funded loans on all those properties. The money trail was a perfect map of the conspiracy. A month later, before dawn, simultaneous raids were executed in Phoenix, Las Vegas, and San Diego. Vincent Morty was arrested at a luxury condo in Henderson. Arthur Carson was taken into custody on the tarmac of a private airfield, just as he was about to board a jet to the Cayman Islands. Gary Walsh, already in state custody, was transferred to federal holding. My son-in-law, David, cut a deal. Facing a potential 20-year federal sentence, he agreed to testify against Morty and Carson in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony laid out the entire playbook: how they targeted property-rich, often elderly owners, groomed a family insider, used dirty notaries, and moved the stolen equity through Carson's network. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I was called to testify. It was brutal. The defense painted David as the mastermind, a greedy kid who duped everyone, including me. But the evidence was overwhelming. The thumbprint, the money trail, the testimony of other victims now identified and saved from ruin. The jury deliberated for 3 days. They returned guilty verdicts on all counts for Morty and Carson: racketeering, wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy. Morty was sentenced to 25 years. Carson, the financier, received 30 years. Gary Walsh got 10. David, for his cooperation, was sentenced to 8 years in a medium security facility. Detective Alvarez was fully cleared by Internal Affairs. The allegations were deemed unfounded, a blatant attempt at obstruction. He returned to work, and the DA's office eventually issued a public apology. In the aftermath, the quiet was deafening. My house was mine again, legally and unquestionably. I had a federal restraining order against David and an order of protection against Morty and Carson, though they'd be old men when they saw daylight again. My daughter Alina tried to reconcile. She wrote me letters from the apartment she'd rented, full of apologies and pleas. She was divorcing David. She said she was in therapy. I wanted to forgive her, but the trust was ash. I established a trust fund for her, enough to live modestly, administered by a third party. It was support, but it was at arm's length. She was no longer in my will. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. I sold the hardware stores. The fight had taken the passion out of it. I used the proceeds, along with a significant portion of my savings, to fund something new: the Reynolds Foundation for Property Fraud Victims. We provide legal aid, title monitoring services, and public education, with a special focus on seniors. Linda Garrett, who'd safely returned after Carson's arrest, joined the board. We became unlikely friends, bonded by a forged signature. One afternoon, 6 months after the trial, I was sitting on my terrace. The desert peace was real again. My phone buzzed. It was Special Agent Vasquez. "Horace," she said, "we're wrapping the asset forfeiture from Carson's empire. The court is liquidating everything. There's something you should know. When we froze his accounts, we found a ledger. He kept records on every potential target. Your file was the thickest." She paused, and there was a photo of you and your late wife, Sarah, standing in front of this house. It was taken from a real estate listing years ago. Carson had circled your face. He'd written a note next to it. My blood went cold. What did it say? It said, "The anchor. Remove the anchor, the ship drifts." It took me a second to understand. Then it hit me. I wasn't just a target because of my property. I was a target because of my reputation. The stable, respected local businessman. If they could break me, publicly and utterly, it would send a message to the entire community. It would show that no one was safe. I was meant to be their flagship victim, their example. My ruin was supposed to make every other potential victim too afraid to fight. The shock gave way to a cold, solid understanding. They hadn't just wanted my money. They'd wanted my dignity, my legacy, to fuel their entire operation. And they'd failed because one notary chose integrity over inertia. I thanked Vasquez and hung up. I looked out at the valley, the anchor. They thought removing me would cause chaos. Instead, their attempt had solidified something. It had given me a new purpose. The final surprise came in the mail a week later, an official envelope from the United States Department of Justice. Inside was a letter and a check. The letter explained that as part of the restitution order in the case, assets seized from Arthur Carson were being distributed to his identified victims. The check was made out to me. The amount was $1.8 million. It wasn't charity. It was quantified justice. A number on a piece of paper that represented a fraction of what they'd tried to steal, returned with the full weight of the law behind it. I didn't cash it for myself. I endorsed it over to the Reynolds Foundation. Let that poison money do some good. Today, my life is different, quieter, purposeful. I still live in the house. Sarah's roses still bloom. I play guitar badly but happily. I have coffee with Linda once a month. We don't talk about the forgery much anymore. We talk about the future. The system worked, but only because people within it chose to do their jobs with courage. A notary, a detective, a federal agent. They were the circuit breakers in a scheme designed to overload a single man. I learned that trust is not a blanket you wrap around everyone called family. It's a seal you grant carefully and it can be broken. And I learned that justice isn't a thunderclap. It's a slow, meticulous process of building a case, brick by brick, until the wall is too high for the guilty to climb over. The phone call that started it all, the one where Linda said, "You need to sit down," didn't destroy my life. It forced me to stand up, and in the end, that made all the difference. So what does my story mean for you? It's a blueprint. A case study in how a crime that feels like a violation of your home actually follows a ruthless, repeatable business plan. They don't see a family. They see an asset ID and a vulnerability score. My vulnerability was a son-in-law with a gambling debt. Yours might be a caretaker, a niece, a longtime tenant, or even a trusted advisor. The shocking truth is that property forgery is a low-risk, high-reward crime for them. A notary stamp can be bought online for $50. A deed is just a piece of paper, and the county recorder's office processes thousands of documents a day. They are not handwriting experts. The system is built on trust, and that trust is being systematically weaponized. My defense wasn't a security system or a big dog. It was an alert notary who did her job with integrity and my own refusal to accept the lie when it was presented to me. That's the first and most important lesson. Verify. Always verify. If someone brings you a document to sign, even a family member, read every word. If something seems off with a property transaction, question it immediately. Your signature is your sovereignty. The second lesson is about your title. You likely have title insurance from when you bought your home. That protects the lender. But do you have an owner's title policy? And more importantly, when was the last time you checked your property records? In most counties, you can do it online for free. Look for any documents recorded against your property that you didn't sign. Look for quitclaim deeds, warranty deeds, or liens you don't recognize. Do this once a year. Make it a habit, like changing your smoke detector batteries. The final lesson is about silence. These operations thrive in the dark on shame and confusion. Victims often feel stupid or embarrassed that they were fooled, especially if family is involved. They don't come forward. That silence is what allows the scheme to roll on to the next target and the next. If you suspect something, report it. Start with the police, but don't hesitate to reach out to your county recorder's fraud unit or the FBI if you hit a wall. You are not alone. My foundation now helps hundreds of people navigate this nightmare every year. The most common thing I hear is, "I thought it was just me." It's never just you. You are a line item in a ledger, and the only way to stop the ledger from being filled is to shine the brightest light possible on it. They called me the anchor. They thought removing me would make every other ship drift helplessly. Instead, it made us build better harbors. It made notaries more vigilant. It made law enforcement create dedicated task forces. It made title companies tighten their protocols. One broken link forced the entire chain to be reforged stronger. Your home is more than an investment. It's your history, your safety, your legacy. Protect it with the same fierceness you would protect a member of your family. Because in the eyes of a forger, that's exactly what it is. A member of your family to be kidnapped for ransom. Stay vigilant, check your titles, trust but always verify. If this story resonated with you or made you think twice about the paper in your filing cabinet, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps us bring more real, hard-hitting stories like this to light. Share your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments below. The community you build there might just be someone's first line of defense. Thank you for listening. Now go check your property records.